In the middle of a torrential downpour, a young mother is hand-washing a $250,000 car for tips. Her 3-year-old twins huddle under a broken umbrella nearby. From his office in the luxury dealership, the owner watches, his morning coffee forgotten. He recognizes the exhaustion in her face. Then he sees the small, familiar birthmark on her jawline, the same one his late business partner had. She is not a stranger. She is the daughter he swore he would protect, now scrubbing his customers' tires to feed her children. Her name is Elena Rossi, and this is not a side hustle. It is her only option to keep a roof over her children's heads. She is one of millions of single mothers in America working punishing jobs for pennies, invisible to the luxury passing by. The man watching is Leo Thorne, a self-made millionaire who built his empire with her father 2 decades ago. He made a promise on his partner's deathbed, a promise he has clearly broken. The question is no longer if he will intervene, but what devastating truth he's been hiding from. 22 years ago, Leo Thorne and Marco Rossi were not kings of Automotive Row. They were 2 mechanics in a cramped, greasy garage dreaming of something bigger. Marco was the magician with engines, his hands capable of diagnosing a problem by sound alone. Leo was the hustler, the negotiator who could sell a vision. Together, they saved every dollar for a decade, and with a massive loan, they opened Thorne and Rossi Prestige Autos. The business was built on a handshake and a brotherhood stronger than blood. For 5 years, it was a perfect partnership. Profits soared, their families merged. Leo was the godfather to Marco's only child, a bright-eyed girl named Elena. He promised her the world, but the foundation of that world was about to crack. Marco's diagnosis of pancreatic cancer was a death sentence delivered in a sterile doctor's office. The treatment drained their savings and nearly bankrupted the young dealership. In the final, pain-filled weeks, Leo sat at his partner's bedside in a shabby rental apartment. Marco, his voice a thin whisper, made Leo swear an oath. "Take care of my girls, Leo. My Sophia and my Elena. You are their family now. Promise me." Leo, gripping his friend's frail hand, promised through tears. "They will never want for anything, I swear on my life." Marco Rossi died 3 days later. Leo buried his brother, and then he buried the promise. The reason was not malice, but a poisonous combination of grief, fear, and a new, ruthless ambition. With Marco gone, Leo became the sole face of the empire. Grief hardened into a relentless drive. He rebranded the business as Thorne Luxury Automotive, scrubbing the Rossi name from the signage, the paperwork, and his daily memory. He told himself it was cleaner for business. He convinced himself Sophia, Marco's widow, wanted her distance. He sent a monthly check for a few $100s, conscience money, to an old P.O. box, never following up when the check stopped being cashed after a few years. He assumed they had moved on. He built a fortress of success, a glass-walled office, a penthouse, a new family. The memory of Marco and his little girl faded into the background noise of a busy life, a guilty ghost he learned to ignore. Meanwhile, Elena Rossi's world collapsed inward. Her mother, Sophia, shattered by loss and struggling with depression, moved them from apartment to apartment. The modest life insurance was consumed by debt. Elena grew up fast, learning that stability was a luxury. She became a mother herself at 24 to twin boys, Jacob and Noah. The father left before their first birthday, leaving behind only overdue bills. Elena joined the 75% of single mothers in the workforce, but a full-time job paying the median income of $40,000 a year couldn't cover the math of survival. Rent for a safe apartment, groceries, and the catastrophic cost of childcare for 2 toddlers, which could devour over half her income, left her in a permanent deficit. This is where the gig economy traps millions. Elena's life became a patchwork of precarious jobs, late-night stocking shelves, cleaning offices after hours, and finally, standing on the curb of luxury dealerships with a bucket and a sponge. Car washing is an industry of last resort, with a median wage of under $15 an hour and rampant wage theft. Workers, often women and immigrants, routinely put in 60-hour weeks without overtime pay. For Elena, it was the only job flexible enough to allow her to run to the subsidized daycare before it closed. She would pay a neighbor's teenager a few dollars to watch the boys in her car, parked just out of sight, while she worked. Her tips were her grocery money. Every dollar was a prisoner of war. Leo Thorne's life, in stark parallel, was one of calculated expansion. He married a socialite, had a daughter he sent to private school, and cultivated an image of impenetrable success. But the fortress had cracks. His marriage was a cold business arrangement. His relationship with his own daughter was distant, mediated by screens and credit cards. The guilt he thought he'd buried would surface in quiet moments, staring out his office window. He, tell himself the Rosses were fine. He built a shrine of excuses, until a cold, rainy Tuesday morning, when his gaze, drifting over the sodden lot, locked onto a figure he didn't consciously recognize. He saw a young woman, soaked to the skin, meticulously hand-drying the hood of a Bentley. The focused desperation in her posture struck him. Then he saw the two small boys, huddled like chicks under a cheap, broken umbrella by the service entrance. A twist of paternal concern he rarely felt tightened in his chest. And then she turned, wiping hair from her face, and the security lights caught her profile. The slight, distinctive curve of her jawline and the small, dark birthmark just below it, a perfect mirror of Marco's. Time stopped. The air left Leo's lungs. The ghost wasn't in his memory anymore. It was on his property, washing a car for spare change. The cognitive dissonance was violent. This couldn't be Alina, Marco's bright goddaughter, destined for college, laughing on his shoulders. This was a weathered stranger. He pulled up old digital records, his hands unsteady. The last address he had was 15 years old. A frantic search through public databases, a terrible growing dread with every click. He found Sophia Rossi's obituary from 4 years prior. Ovarian cancer. Died with substantial medical debt. He found no record of Alina beyond a few old addresses. She had disappeared into the machinery of poverty. And now she was here, a living indictment of his every success, shivering outside his window. Leo's first instinct, forged in boardrooms, was damage control. He couldn't have a scene, not here. He summoned his stern general manager, Carl. Who is that woman washing cars in the rain? And why are there children on the lot? Carl, misunderstanding the source of his boss's anger, shrugged. Some single mom. She's good, detail-oriented. The regular guys won't work in this weather. She's cheap. The kids are quiet. They stay in her beat-up car. Should I send her away? Leo looked from Carl's indifferent face back out the window. Alina was now kneeling, scrubbing a tire's alloy rim with a toothbrush, a tool of the desperate for a perfect finish. Sending her away was the logical, corporate move. It was what the Leo of the last decade would have done. But the ghost of Marco Rossi stood between him and that decision. The broken oath echoed in the silence of his expensive office. He saw not a liability, but a little girl holding his hand at an ice cream parlor. "Uncle Leo, can I have sprinkles?" He had failed her. Spectacularly, every gleaming car on his lot, every piece of art on his wall was a monument to that failure. A seismic shift, long dormant, began within him. It wasn't just guilt. It was a terrifying, clarifying rage at himself, at the system that allowed this to happen to his brother's child, at the sheer, avoidable tragedy of it. He turned back to Carl, his voice low and charged with an emotion the manager had never heard. "No, you will not send her away. Bring her inside, to my office. Now, and for God's sake, get those children someplace warm and dry." What happens next is not a simple rescue. It is a collision. Alina Rossi has spent a lifetime being let down by men, by systems, by promises. She does not know the man in the glass tower. She knows only the struggle to keep her sons fed. When the boss calls you in, it never means good news. She will walk into that luxurious office, water dripping on the Persian rug, expecting to be fired. She will look at Leo Thorne, and she will not see a savior. She will see just another wealthy man who holds her fate in his hands, and the first words out of her mouth will not be a tearful reunion. They will be a shield. "What did I do wrong, sir? Please, my boys are in the break room. I just need this job." Leo, prepared for gratitude, will be utterly disarmed. The real story, the painful, tangled truth of the last 2 decades, is a conversation for which neither of them is ready. And waiting in the wings, completely unaware, is Leo's wife, who is about to discover that her husband's past has just arrived on their doorstep, threatening the carefully curated future she demands. The office door clicked shut, sealing Alina Rossi in a capsule of silent, oppressive luxury. She stood just inside, a puddle forming around her worn sneakers on the deep Persian rug, her arms crossed tightly over her damp gray shirt. Her eyes, wide with a fear she tried to mask with defiance, scanned the room, the floor-to-ceiling windows smeared with rain, the sleek desk that cost more than her car, the abstract art that meant nothing to her. She did not look at the man behind the desk. She focused on a spot on the wall, bracing for the blow. "What did I do wrong, sir? Please, my boys are in the break room. I just need this job." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. It was the voice of someone used to pleading with authority figures who held the power to unravel her life. Leo Thorne remained standing by the window, his back to her, watching the rain sheet down the glass. Her question, so practical and steeped in dread, was a dagger to the heart of his grand, remorseful fantasy. He had imagined a moment of tearful recognition, of immediate forgiveness. He had not imagined this, a stranger treating him as a threat. He slowly turned. Up close, the evidence of her struggle was devastatingly detailed, the raw redness of her knuckles from cold water and chemical soap. The faint, tired lines at the corners of her eyes that belonged on someone twice her age, and that birthmark, a dark smudge on her pale, rain-chilled skin, the incontrovertible signature of his oldest friend. "You didn't do anything wrong," Leo said, his own voice strangely thick. "Please, sit down." Elena didn't move. "I'd rather stand, sir. If this is about the kids, they're no trouble. They stay in the car or with Mindy in accounting if it's slow, they're quiet." She was reciting a defense, each word a brick in a wall. Leo felt a surge of frustration, not at her but at the world that taught her this posture. He took a step closer, then stopped, seeing her subtly flinch. He was the predator in this scenario. He raised his hands, a gesture of surrender. "Elena, your name is Elena Rossi." A statement, not a question. Her eyes finally snapped to his, sharp with confusion and suspicion. "How do you know my name?" This was the precipice. Leo could lie. He could concoct a story about routine HR paperwork, but the ghost of Marco Rossi filled the space between them, demanding honesty. "I knew your father," Leo said, the words feeling both monumental and insufficient. "Marco Rossi, he was my business partner, my best friend." He watched the information land. There was no spark of recognition in her eyes, only a deepening wariness. Her father was a ghost from a childhood she barely remembered, a figure in faded photographs, a source of her mother's quiet sadness. "Okay," she said slowly, her arms tightening. "A lot of people knew my dad. Sir, with respect, does this mean I'm fired or not?" Leo was floundering. The script was gone. He gestured desperately to the plush chair in front of his desk. "Please, just sit for 5 minutes. I'll have coffee brought in, tea, something for the boys." The mention of her children softened her guard for a millisecond, a maternal calculation flashing behind her eyes. Free food, a warm drink. She gave a curt, stiff nod and moved to the edge of the chair, perching as if ready to flee. Leo buzzed his assistant, requesting coffee, hot chocolate, and whatever pastries are in the kitchen. He then took his seat behind the monolithic desk, a barrier he suddenly hated. "Your father and I, we built this place, this business. It was Thorne and Rossi." He pointed a trembling finger at a small, framed black and white photo on a bookshelf, almost hidden behind awards. It showed 2 young men in coveralls, grinning in front of a rusty garage door, arms slung over each other's shoulders. "That was us, the day we signed the loan papers." Elena's gaze followed his finger. She studied the photo of the laughing young mechanic who shared her eyes, her smile. A distant, almost painful flicker of memory, the smell of grease and aftershave being tossed in the air by strong hands. She looked away, back to her own rough hands clasped in her lap. "My mom didn't talk about that much. She said the business didn't work out after he got sick." The simple, devastating accuracy of the statement winded Leo. "It did work out," he said, his voice low. "It worked out very well for me. The shame was a physical taste, metallic and sour. I made a promise to your father, Elena, when he was at the end. I promised him I would take care of you and your mother. I swore it." Now her head lifted fully, her dark eyes locking onto his with an intensity that burned. The confusion was being replaced by something else, a dawning, cold comprehension. "Take care of us," she repeated, the words hollow. She let her gaze make a slow, deliberate tour of the office, the Italian leather, the crystal decanters, the panoramic view of the luxury lot. Then her eyes returned to him, to his tailored suit, his platinum wristwatch. "You call this taking care of us?" There was no accusation in her tone. It was worse. It was the flat delivery of an obvious, indisputable fact. Leo had no defense. "I sent money for years." It sounded pathetic even to him, to a P.O. box. "When the checks stopped being cashed, I assumed you were okay, that you moved on." Elena let out a soft, humorless sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "We moved, all right, 7 times in 10 years. The last address you had was probably from when I was in middle school. My mom got sick, really sick. The mail, it wasn't a priority, and then she died. She stated it plainly, a seismic event reduced to a simple sentence. 4 years ago, the debt, it followed me. A knock at the door saved Leo from having to formulate a response that wasn't a groan of utter despair. His assistant entered with a tray bearing a silver coffee pot, delicate cups, 2 mugs of hot chocolate piled with whipped cream, and a plate of artisanal pastries. Elena's focus immediately shifted to the food, not with greed, but with a tactical assessment. Her boys loved whipped cream. This was a resource. The assistant, giving Elena a polite, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes, left silently. The door clicked shut again, returning them to their private arena of anguish. Elena, listen to me, Leo said, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk. I didn't know, but I know now. This ends today. You are not washing another car. You and the boys, you're coming home with me. I have a guest house. It's empty, fully furnished. You can stay as long as you need. I'll get you a proper job here in the office with benefits, healthcare, a salary. He was vomiting solutions, trying to build a bridge over 2 decades of neglect with gold bricks. He saw it as salvation. She saw it as another overwhelming transaction from a man who held all the power. Elena didn't touch the hot chocolate. She stared at him, and for the first time he saw Marco's fiery spirit, not just his features. You want me and my 3-year-olds to move into your guest house just like that because you feel bad? She shook her head slowly. I don't know you, Mr. Thorne. My dad's ghost doesn't make you family. It makes you a guy who broke a promise. I've had landlords, bosses, social workers, all kinds of people make promises. They don't mean anything. She stood up, her decision made. I appreciate the talk and the pastries for the kids, but I need to get back to work. I've lost an hour of tips already. Leo shot to his feet, panic rising. Elena, please, you're out there in the rain. The boys are in a cold break room. Let me fix this. His voice cracked, revealing the raw plea beneath the billionaire's command. It was this crack that made her pause at the door, her hand on the knob. She looked back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. You want to fix something? My transmission is slipping. It'll be $600 I don't have. Fix that. Don't try to fix my life. You don't know the first thing about it. And she walked out, leaving Leo alone with the steaming coffee, the untouched pastries, and the crushing weight of a second rejection. He stood there paralyzed. She was right. He was trying to write a check on a tragedy he didn't understand. He looked at the photo of Marco. His friend's smiling face seemed to ask, is that all you've got? No, it was. He buzzed his assistant again. Cancel my afternoon, all of it, and find out where Elena Rossi's car is parked. He wasn't going to let her vanish again. But as he grabbed his coat, his personal phone vibrated on the desk. The screen flashed with a name, Diana. His wife, a different kind of storm, was about to make landfall. Diana Thorne had been monitoring the dealership's security feeds from her tablet in her downtown yoga studio, a habit born of quiet control, not suspicion. She had seen the bedraggled woman and her children being ushered inside. She had seen her husband's unusual, agitated body language through the office window. She had seen the woman leave, not fired, but seemingly dismissed. And then she saw Leo, looking utterly wrecked, head for the service bay. Diana's curiosity, a cold and precise instrument, was now fully engaged. She made a call. Carl, it's Diana. Who was that woman in Leo's office just now? The general manager, eager to please the real power in the family, divulged everything he knew. A car wash vagrant, single mother causing a scene. He added Leo's strange, emotional command to bring her inside. Find out her full name and everything about her, Diana instructed, her voice smooth as ice. Discreetly. Meanwhile, Leo found Elena's car, a decade-old sedan with a cracked windshield, parked behind the dumpsters. The boys, Jacob and Noah, were in the back seat, now dry and contentedly coloring with broken crayons on scrap paper, watched by a bored teenage receptionist. Elena was already back at the far end of the lot, sponge in hand, attacking a convertible with a ferocity that spoke of pent-up emotion. Leo didn't approach her. He went to his head technician, a man who'd been with him since the garage days. Tony, that blue sedan behind the dumpsters, drop everything, full diagnostic, fix everything, I mean everything, tires, brakes, transmission, windshield, don't give her a bill, and don't tell her it was me, say it was a dealership promotion for hard-working staff. Tony raised an eyebrow but nodded. You got it, boss. Leo's next move was more impulsive. He drove to the nearest big box store and bought out half the children's section, 2 car seats rated for all ages, winter coats, boots, piles of clothes in the right sizes, puzzles, sturdy toys, and a double stroller. He filled his SUV to the brim. Then he went to a grocery store and bought groceries, real food, not just pastries, milk, fruit, vegetables, chicken, pasta. He was acting out a frantic, material penitence. As he loaded the bags, his phone rang again. Diana, he sent it to voicemail. A minute later, a text arrived. We need to talk about your sudden interest in charity cases. The board dinner is tonight. Do not be late. The board dinner, a monthly performative ritual with his investors, the last thing he could stomach. Back at the dealership, as the gray afternoon faded into an early dusk, Elena finished her last car. Her body ached. The encounter in the office had left her feeling scraped raw and strangely exhausted. She collected her boys from the kind receptionist, her mind already on the dinner of cereal she could afford. As she rounded the corner to her car, she stopped dead. It was gone. A spike of pure terror shot through her. Her car was her lifeline, her only asset. Had it been towed, stolen? Then she saw Tony, the mechanic, waving from the service bay door. Her car was inside, up on the lift, its undercarriage exposed. There you are, just in time. We're giving it the works. Won't be ready till tomorrow morning. Complimentary service. Elena was speechless. This made no sense. Dealerships didn't give complimentary transmission rebuilds. She thought immediately of Leo Thorne. This was his doing, the fix he'd chosen. Her initial reaction was resentment, another wealthy person making a decision for her. But as Tony showed her the corroded brake lines they'd replaced, the bald tires, she felt a treacherous flicker of relief. This car had been a rolling death trap. She'd known it every time she drove her children. How do I get home? She asked, defeated. Tony smiled. Boss left you a loaner around the front. The loaner was a modest but brand new safe SUV. When she opened the back door, she saw the 2 pristine car seats already installed. In the cargo hold were the bags of groceries and the mountain of gifts. There was a simple note on top, in a bold, unfamiliar handwriting. For Jacob and Noah, no strings, L. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in her eyes. She fought them back fiercely. This wasn't kindness. It was a tsunami of guilt. It was overwhelming. It felt less like a helping hand and more like an erasure of her own ability to provide. She loaded her confused boys into the new seats, her movements robotic. As she slid into the driver's seat, the unfamiliar smell of new leather surrounded her. It smelled like someone else's life. She had no choice but to accept the ride, the food, the safety for her children. The weight of the charity was immense. She drove to her cramped, moldy apartment in a daze, the SUV feeling like a spaceship that had landed in her grim reality. That evening, at the opulent board dinner in a downtown hotel ballroom, Leo was a ghost. He smiled, shook hands, gave vague answers about quarterly projections, all while seeing Elena's wary eyes and the image of his old sedan on the lift. Diana, resplendent in a sheath dress, watched him like a hawk. During a lull, she glided to his side, her hand possessive on his arm, her smile venomously sweet. You've been distracted all evening, darling. Worried about your little project. Leo stiffened. What project? The car wash woman, Elena Rossi. Diana let the name hang in the air, watching the color drain from his face. I did some digging, Rossi. That's a name from the ancient history you never like to discuss, isn't it? Your dead partner's daughter, how melodramatic. She leaned closer, her whisper a razor in his ear. Listen to me carefully. You will write her a check tomorrow, a big one, and then you will never see her again. I will not have the scandal of some poverty-stricken remnant of your past dragging down our name, our standing, or our daughter's future. Do you understand? Leo looked at his wife, truly looked at her, and saw a stranger. He saw the embodiment of the hollow life he'd built on a broken oath. The final thread of that life snapped. No, Diana, he said, his voice calm and clear. I don't understand. He removed her hand from his arm. She is my family, and I am going to help her. If that's a scandal, then let it be. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone, her perfect composure fissurating into shock and then into cold, calculated rage. Leo didn't go home that night. He drove to Elena's apartment building, parking the SUV across the street. He didn't go in. He just sat there in the dark, keeping watch over the dim window where his brother's daughter and grandchildren slept, finally understanding that fixing a transmission was the easiest part. The real repair work was on himself, and it had to start with standing his ground. But Diana Thorne was not a woman who accepted defeat. As Leo kept his lonely vigil, she was already on the phone with her lawyer, drafting a new plan, not to help Elena Rossi, but to erase her from their lives permanently. And her first move would be to attack the one thing Elena could not defend, her right to be a mother. Dawn found Leo Thorne still in his car, stiff and bleary-eyed, watching the apartment building stir to life. He saw Elena emerge just after 7, her boys bundled in their new coats, her posture weary but purposeful. She didn't glance at the loner SUV. She walked right past it, the boys in tow, heading for the bus stop. She was rejecting his gift. The message was clear. She would accept the repaired car, a tool for survival, but not the trappings of his pity. Leo felt a strange pang of respect. She had a spine of titanium. He started his engine, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't force his way in, he would earn his way in. But first, he had to go home and face the war he'd started. The Thorne residence was a monument of chilled silence. Diana was at the breakfast table, sipping espresso, her face a mask of polished marble. "You didn't come home," she stated, without looking up from her tablet. "I was handling a situation," Leo replied, pouring coffee. "The situation is a liability," Diana corrected, her eyes lifting, cold and sharp. "I spoke with Alan this morning." Alan Strickland, their Pitbull family attorney. "He's drawing up papers for a one-time, structured settlement for the Rossi woman, $250,000, non-disclosure agreement included. She signs, she leaves the state, she never contacts us again. It's more than generous." Leo set his cup down with a sharp clink. "You think this is about money? You think I can write a check and make my brother's child disappear like she's a nuisance lawsuit?" Diana's composure cracked just for a second. "She is a lawsuit waiting to happen. She could claim emotional distress, backdated child support, God knows what. And the press, millionaire abandoned partner's family, it would be a feeding frenzy. Our investors would panic. Our daughter's reputation at school." She stood, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I will not let your midlife crisis of conscience destroy everything I've built for this family." The word I echoed in the grand kitchen. Leo finally saw the truth he'd long ignored. This wasn't a partnership, it was a custodianship. He was the revenue stream, she was the curator of their lifestyle. "You built nothing, Diana," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You spent what I earned. And you're right, I have a conscience. It's 22 years late, but it's here. Elena and her boys are my family, they are staying. And if you try to use Alan or anyone else to hurt them, you will find out exactly what I'm capable of when I'm not trying to be polite." He turned and walked out, leaving her speechless for the second time in 12 hours. He was going to the office, but not to work. He was going to dig. In his private office, Leo locked the door and opened the old, fireproof safe bolted to the floor behind his desk. Inside were the relics of his former life, the original hand-scribbled partnership agreement with Marco, yellowed photographs, and a stack of Marco's personal papers Sofia had given him after the funeral, which he'd never had the courage to examine. His hands trembled as he lifted out a worn manila envelope labeled Marco Personal. He spilled the contents onto his desk. There were old bills, a birthday card to a baby Elena, and at the bottom, a sealed, smaller envelope with his name on it in Marco's looping handwriting. "For Leo, to be opened if anything happens to me." Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He broke the brittle seal with a letter opener. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter dated just 2 weeks before Marco's death. "Leo, brother, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be a schmuck and feel bad. We had a good run. I'm writing this because I'm doped up on pain meds and I can say the mushy stuff. I trust you with my life, which is almost over, so I'm trusting you with what comes after. Sophia is strong, but the world is hard on strong women. Elena is my light. She looks just like my mom, you know. I need you to be their anchor, not just with money, Leo. With your time, your presence. Be the uncle I know you can be. Teach Elena how to change a tire so she never feels stranded. Tell her stories about me so she knows her dad wasn't just a sick guy. The business is yours now. Build it into an empire. But remember, an empire is just a fancy pile of rocks if there's no family to share it with. Don't let the rocks become your whole world. Your brother always, Marco." The letter was a physical blow. Leo slumped in his chair, the paper crumpling in his fist. Marco hadn't just asked for a financial safety net. He asked for a continuation of love, of legacy. Leo had provided neither. He had built the empire of rocks and moved in alone. The grief he had suppressed for 2 decades erupted, raw and choking. He wept great heaving sobs for his lost friend, for the lost years, for the little girl who learned to change a tire not from her uncle, but from a YouTube video in a desperate parking lot. This wasn't just about fixing a mistake anymore. It was about honoring a sacred handwritten trust. He wiped his face, a new steely clarity in his eyes. He needed a plan, not just gestures. He called his most discreet and trusted employee, his assistant Miranda. Miranda, I need you to find the best family law attorney in the city, not Alan Strickland, someone with a heart and a killer instinct. And I need you to find a safe, furnished rental property, a duplex or a townhouse with a yard in a good school district. Lease it in the name of a trust. Do it today. He was preparing for a siege. He knew Diana's opening move would be to question Elena's fitness as a mother. He would be ready. Across town, Elena's day was unraveling. She had taken the bus to the dealership to pick up her now-repaired car, her mind a storm of conflicted emotions. As she was signing the paperwork, a zero-balance invoice that felt like a fairy tale, a grim-faced man and woman in formal clothing approached. Elena Rossi, the woman asked, flashing a badge. We're with Child Protective Services. We'd like to speak with you about your children, Jacob and Noah. Elena's blood turned to ice. The world narrowed to a tunnel. The CPS worker continued, her tone professionally neutral, but her eyes scanning Elena's worn clothes. We received an anonymous concern regarding their welfare, specifically about them being unsupervised in a vehicle and exposed to harsh weather conditions at a place of business. We need to conduct a home visit. It was a targeted, precise attack. It used the truth, the boys being in her car while she worked, and weaponized it. Elena knew the system. A CPS investigation could mean foster care, even temporarily. It was the nuclear option for a struggling parent. Her voice shook as she explained the daycare situation, the flexible job, the safety measures. The agents listened, took notes, and insisted on seeing her apartment that afternoon. As they walked away, Elena leaned against her newly fixed car, trembling. She knew who had done this. It had to be him, Leo Thorne. This was the other shoe dropping. The rich man's guilt had turned to resentment, and now he was cleaning up his problem the ruthless way. The gifts, the fixed car, it was all a setup to make her look unstable. Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded her veins. She didn't wait. She drove straight to Thorne Luxury Automotive, storming past the receptionist, ignoring the protests, and throwing open the door to Leo's office. He was on the phone but hung up instantly, rising at the fury on her face. You, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. You called CPS on me. You fix my car one day and try to take my kids the next. What kind of monster are you? Leo's face went pale. Elena, no, I would never. I'm trying to protect you from that. Protect me? She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. By having government agents show up at my job, I knew it. I knew all this help was too good to be true. You want us gone, but you don't want to get your hands dirty. Well, congratulations. You've just made everything 1,000 times worse. Leo came around the desk, hands up. Elena, listen to me. It was my wife, Diana. She's trying to scare you away. She's threatened by you. I am on your side. I have a lawyer for you lined up. I'm renting a safer place for you and the boys. I'm not your enemy. But the trust was incinerated. Elena backed toward the door, her eyes blazing. Stay away from me. Stay away from my children. If you come near us again, I will call the police. I don't want your lawyer, your house, or your guilt. I want you to disappear from my life, for good. She turned and fled. Leo stood helpless, his plan in ashes. Then his phone rang. It was Miranda. Sir, I found the attorney. Her name is Rebecca Shaw. She's excellent. She also took the liberty of doing a quick background check when you mentioned the CPS issue. So there's something you need to see. It's about Elena's mother, Sophia, the medical debt from her cancer treatment. It wasn't just hospital bills. Leo's stomach dropped. What was it? It was a high-interest loan. Taken out against her life insurance policy from a subsidiary of one of your own holding companies, Thorne Capital Partners. Elena isn't just poor because you weren't there. She's poor, in part, because your company profited from her mother's desperation. The revelation was a moral neutron bomb. Leo's own empire, the very engine of his wealth, had been a vulture circling Marco's widow. The abstraction of business had just become horrifically personal. He had failed Sophia not just through absence, but through the predatory machinery of his own success. The layers of his failure were infinite. Get Rebecca Shaw on the phone with me now, he said, his voice a ghost, and pull every file on that loan, every single one. That afternoon, as a shell-shocked Elena submitted to the humiliating home inspection in her dilapidated apartment, Leo was in the office of Rebecca Shaw, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a reputation for dismantling systemic bullies. He laid it all out: the partnership, the promise, the abandonment, Diana's threat, the CPS call, and the crushing discovery of the loan. Rebecca listened, her expression growing graver. "This is a multidimensional crisis, Mr. Thorne. The immediate threat is the custody issue. The anonymous tip is classic harassment, but it can't be ignored. We will counterfile for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress against your wife, naming her as a Jane Doe for now. It will muddy the waters and put CPS on notice that this is a malicious act. Secondly, we need to get Alina and the boys into stable, documented housing immediately. Your rental idea is good, but it can't come from you. It will look like coercion. We'll use a non-profit housing advocacy group I work with. You can fund it anonymously." Leo nodded, desperate for a viable path. "And the loan?" Rebecca's lips thinned. "That's the thermonuclear option. If we can prove the loan terms were predatory and targeted a vulnerable widow, we could have it nullified. It would also be a massive scandal for your company. But it's a double-edged sword. It directly links Alina's suffering to your business. It could be the ammo your wife needs to have you declared unfit to run the company, claiming emotional impairment or conflict of interest." Leo didn't hesitate. "Nullify it. I don't care about the scandal. That debt dies today." Rebecca gave him a long, appraising look, seeing the genuine transformation. "All right, then we go on the offensive on all fronts." The next 48 hours were a blur of clandestine activity. Through Rebecca's network, Alina and the boys were quietly moved into a clean, bright townhouse in a family-friendly neighborhood, their rent covered for a year by a charitable foundation. Alina, suspicious but out of options, with CPS requiring a suitable home, accepted it as a miracle, unaware of the source. Rebecca accompanied her to the follow-up CPS interview, presenting documentation of the new housing, stable childcare arrangements, and character references from Alina's former teachers. The case was marked unfounded and closed. Alina felt the noose loosen, but the fear remained. Meanwhile, Leo confronted the board of Thorne Capital Partners. In a tense, private session, he presented the file on the loan to Sophia Rossi. "This stops today. Every predatory loan in our portfolio, every high-interest product targeting the desperate, is being reviewed and restructured. Starting with this one, it is forgiven, and the subsidiary that issued it is being dissolved." The board members, men and women who saw only balance sheets, were aghast. "Leo, this is a profitable line of business. You can't unilaterally—" "I can, and I am," Leo interrupted, his voice leaving no room for debate. "If any of you have a problem with that, your shares will be bought out at market value. This company will not profit from human suffering anymore, especially not the suffering of my family." The word family hung in the air, redefining everything. News of the internal shake-up and the mysterious forgiveness of a large chunk of debt inevitably leaked. Diana, monitoring Leo's every move through her remaining allies on the board, saw her opening. She went public, not with a lawsuit, but with a carefully placed story in the city's premier society blog. The headline was brutal: "Auto King's Breakdown, Billionaire, Erratic Behavior Threatens Company Stability." The article painted Leo as emotionally unstable, manipulated by a gold-digging stranger from his past, making reckless financial decisions that endangered jobs and investor value. It cited the dissolved subsidiary and the unexplained housing of a mystery woman. It was a masterstroke, attacking his professional credibility and personal character simultaneously. The fallout was instantaneous. Stock in Thorne's publicly traded entities dipped. News vans gathered outside the dealership. Leo's daughter, home from boarding school, was besieged with questions from classmates. The Empire of Rocks was trembling, and in her new townhouse, Alina saw the news story on her phone. She saw her own life reduced to a sordid tabloid rumor. She saw the photo of Leo, looking strained, and the vicious quotes from a source close to the family. She finally understood the magnitude of the war being fought around her, and she realized Leo, for all his past failures, was now risking everything, not to assuage his guilt, but to make things right. The wall around her heart developed its first crack. Leo, barricaded in his office, watched the storm break. His phone rang. It was Rebecca Shaw. "The article is defamatory. We can sue, but that's a long game. We need to change the narrative now. There's one way to do that. You have to tell your story, the whole story, before Diana spins it again." Leo knew she was right, but it meant exposing every failure, every ugly truth to the world. It meant dragging Marco's memory and Alina's pain into the public glare. It was the last thing he wanted. But as he looked at the photo of Marco on his desk, he heard his friend's voice, "Don't let the rocks become your whole world." He made a decision. He called the local network affiliate, the one with a reputation for serious journalism. "I'll give you an interview, 1 hour, live, no conditions. I'll answer every question." The news director, smelling the ratings bonanza, agreed immediately. The interview was set for 8 o'clock that night. Leo didn't know if it would save his company or destroy it. He didn't know if Alina would ever speak to him again. But for the first time in 22 years, he was going to tell the truth. The whole unvarnished, devastating truth. And waiting in the wings, Diana was already preparing her final, most devastating move to prove that Leo was not just a bad businessman, but an unfit father himself, using his own neglected relationship with their daughter as the ultimate weapon. The battle for the past was about to become a war for the future, live on television. The studio lights were blinding, a sterile heat that did nothing to thaw the ice in Leo Thorne's veins. He sat across from veteran journalist Michaela Rose, whose reputation for cutting through PR spin was legendary. The floor director counted down, 5, 4, 3. In millions of living rooms, the dramatic teaser aired, "Billionaire in Crisis, a secret family, a broken promise, and a live confession." 2, 1. Leo looked directly into the camera, seeing not an audience, but the ghosts of his past waiting for judgment. Michaela began with the Society blog's allegations. "Mr. Thorne, you've been accused of erratic, emotionally compromised leadership, of jeopardizing your company for a woman from your past. How do you respond?" Leo didn't blink. "I respond by saying the article is right about one thing: I have been compromised for 22 years. He then did the unimaginable. He told the story, not the sanitized version, but the raw, ugly truth. He spoke of Marco Rossi, not as a tragic footnote, but as his brother, his better half. He described the deathbed promise in wrenching detail. And then he confessed, his voice cracking with genuine shame, how he had broken that vow through cowardice and ambition, how he had erased his partner's name and abandoned his family. He spoke of seeing Alina in the rain, the shock of recognition, and his own pathetic attempts to buy his way out of guilt. He didn't cast himself as a hero. He painted himself as the villain of the first half of the story. Then he dropped the bombshell. "And the deepest failure," he said, leaning forward, "is that my failure wasn't just personal. The company I built, Thorne Capital, profited from their suffering." After Marco died, his widow, Sophia, took out a high-interest loan from one of our subsidiaries to pay for her cancer treatment. We preyed on her desperation. That debt helped bury Alina in poverty. So when you ask if I'm jeopardizing my company, my answer is yes. I am dismantling the parts of it that would do that to any family ever again. In her new townhouse, Alina watched, frozen, a hand over her mouth. She heard the pain in his voice, saw the unvarnished regret. This wasn't a calculated PR move. This was a man publicly flaying himself alive. Her anger, once a solid wall, began to fissure. He was telling her truth, their truth, to the world. For the first time, she didn't feel like a dirty secret or a charity case. She felt seen. Back in the studio, Michaela, visibly moved, asked the pivotal question. "Why now, after all these years of silence?" Leo looked down at his hands, then back up, his eyes glistening. "Because a little girl once asked me if I was the person God sent to help her, and I realized I was. I was the obstacle that had been in the way for 22 years. I can't change the past, but I can choose not to be that obstacle anymore." The raw spirituality of the statement, so at odds with his billionaire image, sent a ripple through the studio. The interview was a seismic event in real time. Social media erupted. Comments shifted from schadenfreude to stunned respect. The narrative was turning, but Diana Thorne was watching from her lawyer's office, her plan already in motion. As Leo walked out of the studio, feeling both hollowed and lighter, he was served with new papers, not from the company board, but from family court. Diana was filing for sole custody of their 16-year-old daughter, Chloe, citing Leo, public mental instability, and dangerous fixation on a stranger as evidence of his unfitness as a father. It was her masterstroke, attacking the one relationship he had left. Leo crumpled, the brief high of honesty shattered. He had expected a corporate fight, not a war for his child. He called Rebecca Shaw, his voice ragged. She's using Chloe. Rebecca was calm. We expected this. It's a brutal tactic, but it shows she's desperate. We need Chloe's testimony. We need to know where she stands. The thought of dragging his teenage daughter into this hell made Leo sick. He drove to his empty, cold mansion, the site of his impending defeat. What he didn't know was that Chloe Thorne had also watched the interview. From her dorm room at boarding school, she saw her father, usually so composed and distant, break down on national television. She heard him speak of love and failure and a family she never knew existed. For years, she had viewed her father as an ATM and her mother as a curator of their image. She felt like a prop. His public confession was the most real thing she had ever seen him do. When her mother called, instructing her to pack and come home, to be ready to give a statement against her father, Chloe made a decision of her own. The next morning, Leo was in Rebecca's office, strategizing a defense when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Chloe, I'm at the coffee shop on Grand, we need to talk, alone." His heart leapt into his throat. He rushed out. He found her at a corner table, looking older and more serious than he remembered. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. He sat, fearing her anger. "Chloe, I'm so sorry you were dragged into this." She shook her head. "I watched the interview, is it true?" "All of it," Leo nodded. "Yes, every shameful part." Chloe stirred her drink, her expression unreadable. "Mom told me this Alina person is a con artist, that you're having a breakdown, but you didn't look broken on TV. You looked sorry, and you looked like you finally cared about something other than the next deal." She took a deep breath. "I looked Alina Rossi up. She's a mom with twins. She was washing cars in the rain. That's real. Our life isn't real, Dad. It's just stuff." Leo reached across the table, but stopped short. "I failed her, and I failed you. I got lost in the stuff." Chloe looked him in the eye. "I'm not going to testify for Mom. I'm going to tell the judge that I want to live with you, and that I want to meet my cousin if she'll have us." The words were a lifeline, an absolution he didn't deserve. Tears filled his eyes. "Why, after how absent I've been?" Chloe gave a small, sad smile. "Because you're trying to come back. Mom is just trying to win." In that moment, Leo didn't just regain a daughter. He met the remarkable young woman she had become despite him. With Chloe's allegiance clear, Diana's custody case collapsed before it began. Facing total defeat and exposure of her malicious strategies, Diana's lawyers advised a settlement. The divorce was swift and brutal, financially, but Leo didn't care about the money. He was free. The board, seeing the public's overwhelming positive response to Leo's integrity and the stabilizing influence of his daughter's support, backed down. The corporate crisis became a story of ethical transformation, oddly boosting the brand's reputation. Now came the hardest part, facing Alina again, armed not with gifts but with the proof of his actions, the dissolved loan documents, the closed CPS case, the public testimony. Leo asked Rebecca to arrange a meeting. He would accept any outcome. Alina agreed to meet at a park, a neutral ground. She brought the boys. Leo came alone. He sat on a bench, the boys playing on the swings nearby. The silence was heavy. Finally, Alina spoke. "I watched the interview." "I know," Leo said. "I'm sorry for the spectacle." "Don't be," she said softly, watching Jacob push Noah on a swing. For the first time, someone with power told the truth about how hard it is, not for pity, but for accountability. She turned to him. "The debt, the one from your company, you really erased it." Leo handed her the official notice of debt forgiveness. "It's gone, and the subsidiary that created it is gone. It's a small, late thing, but it's done." Alina stared at the paper, the physical proof of a burden lifted. A silent tear traced its way down her cheek. This wasn't charity, this was justice. "And the townhouse?" she asked. "Rent paid for a year by a foundation. After that, you can stay or go. It's yours, no strings. I had nothing to do with it." He told the technical truth. She knew the real truth, but appreciated the fiction that allowed her dignity. "My lawyer, Rebecca Shaw, she's yours for life, for anything you need." And he hesitated. "There is a job, if you want it. In the new community outreach wing I'm starting, you'd be designing programs to help single parents with childcare and transportation. You know the problems better than any MBA. The salary is $95,000 a year, with benefits." He was offering her a ladder, not a handout, a chance to use her hard-won expertise. Alina was silent for a long time, watching her sons laugh. "I need to think about the job," she said finally. "But the boys, they ask about the man who fixed our car. They call you the car doctor." A faint, tentative smile touched her lips. Leo's breath caught. I would like, if it's okay with you, to be their uncle, to tell them stories about their grandpa Marco, to be there, however you'll allow." Elena looked at him, really looked, seeing not the billionaire or the failed promise keeper, but a tired, remorseful man trying to rebuild. She saw her father's friend. She nodded slowly. "You can start with dinner on Sunday at our place. Don't bring a fleet of toys, just be yourself." It was a fragile, monumental opening. Leo simply nodded, overwhelmed, afraid to shatter the moment with words. The following months were a slow, careful reconstruction. Leo sold the mansion, moved into a smaller home near Chloe's school. He scaled back his corporate role, focusing on the philanthropic initiatives. Elena accepted the job, bringing a fierce, practical empathy that transformed the programs. She and Chloe, against all odds, forged a tentative, genuine friendship, bonded by their shared experience of Leo's belated awakening. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months later, they were all at Elena's townhouse: Leo, Chloe, Elena, Jacob, and Noah. The boys were showing Leo how to build a fort with blankets. Laughter filled the small living room. In the quiet chaos, Elena went to the hall closet and pulled out a small, dusty cardboard box from her few saved possessions. She brought it to Leo. "I found this when I was packing the old apartment. I think you should have it." Leo opened the box. Inside was a stack of his own old, uncashed checks made out to Sophia Rossi, and beneath them a simple hand-tooled leather wallet, worn smooth with age. He opened it. Inside was a faded photo of two young mechanics, arms around each other, and in the clear plastic window a handwritten note on a scrap of paper. It was in Marco's handwriting. For Leo, when he remembers, he had sent this wallet to Sophia with the first check, a token of his promise. She had kept it, and the checks, all those years, a quiet testament to a faith he had not honored. This was the final, surprising detail. She hadn't cashed the checks not because she'd moved on, but as a silent, stubborn refusal to commodify his promise. She had kept the wallet as a relic of the man her husband believed Leo to be. The weight of her enduring hope was almost too much to bear. Leo held the wallet, the physical tether to his brother, and to the trust he had finally, imperfectly, reclaimed. He looked at Elena, then at their children playing, and finally at his own daughter. The empire of rocks was gone. In its place was something fragile, messy, and real. He had not been the person God sent to help them, but he had finally chosen to become the person who got out of the way and then, slowly, learned how to help. The story that began with a woman washing a car in the rain ended not with a rescue, but with a family, fractured and flawed, choosing to begin again. The story of Elena and Leo is not a fairy tale. There was no magical inheritance, no sudden lottery win that erased decades of struggle. The change was messier, harder, and more human. It began not with a grand gesture, but with a simple, unbearable sight, a person in pain, and the recognition that you are, in some way, responsible. For Leo Thorne, the rain on the window became a mirror, forcing him to see the man he had become, a man who could look past his own flesh and blood. His journey back was not a sprint to heroism, but a slow, painful crawl out of a fortress of his own making, brick by guilty brick. Elena Rossi's story is the reality for millions. A recent study found that over 75% of single mothers are in the workforce, yet they remain among the poorest demographic groups in the country. Childcare costs can consume more than half their income. They exist in a permanent state of economic precarity, one missed paycheck away from catastrophe. They are not statistics. They are people making impossible choices every single day. Elena's resilience wasn't born from strength, but from the absence of any other option. Her forgiveness wasn't granted because Leo deserved it, but because her spirit was too large to be defined solely by his failure. This narrative forces us to ask a difficult question. How many of us are living in glass towers of our own construction, looking past the people we were meant to see, the promises we've buried, the connections we've neglected in the pursuit of a success that feels increasingly hollow? We build empires of rocks and call them lives, while the real treasures, the fragile human connections, are left outside in the rain. The miracle of this story is not that a billionaire saved a poor mother. The miracle is that a broken man finally looked down, and a wounded woman, against every instinct, chose to look back. Redemption is never a single act. It is a daily choice. For Leo, it meant dismantling the predatory parts of his empire and sitting on the floor to build a blanket fort. For Elena, it meant accepting help without surrendering her dignity. For both, it meant building a new family from the salvage of two broken ones. Their story reminds us that it is never too late to remember who you promised to be. The world is filled with unseen struggles and quiet desperation, but it is also filled with the possibility of second chances, if only we have the courage to open our eyes and meet them. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your own life, share it. Sometimes, the most powerful change begins with a single story that opens a single heart. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more journeys into the human spirit. Until next time, remember to look past the rain on the window. You never know who might be waiting for you to see them.